Alright guys, so I'm starting to put together my PerfectPass system. We've got some parts that I ordered from them. We got the cables, servo bracket, throttle cable, and some directions. And then over here some of the things that I've already had that I sourced elsewhere. So got some miscellaneous cables, some different gauges, then we got our master module here. So it's all going in this right here. Stay tuned. Okay, so we bolted the bracket to the servo with some nuts and bolts. They sent us rivets, but I preferred the nut and bolt just in case we ever have to take it apart. The knob went right on top, and there's a set screw here. So we put that on, threaded the linkage, and then I zip tied the wire harness together, and we're going to cover it with this flexible conduit just to make sure it's protected. Okay, next step, we're in the boat. I've removed the electronic fuel injection air filter, went right on here. The next thing is we need to mount the servo to this water hose with the hose clamps. So it's going to go somewhere right over here like this. The throttle linkage is going to go underneath this bar. It's going to bolt right on here with taking off this bolt and connecting the throttle cable down there. Okay, so the servo is mounted to the hose. I just use hose clamps right here. You can kind of see them from underneath. Nice and snug, not too tight. The throttle linkage, we just disconnected right here. So I need to connect this end to the other end of the cable. Then I'll mount the bracket on this post. Okay, so the next step, we got the throttle linkage connected. It was very hard to reach, right next to the fuel rail. We got the new plate put on right here, fits really nice. The throttle cable is really kind of tucked into this little channel, but I think we got it figured out. It's dialed in, goes right into here, the servo. And stay tuned, next video clip we'll be running the wiring harness under the dash and up to where the gauge is going. Okay, so we have everything all buttoned up, so the air cleaner's back on. I adjusted the servo a little bit. I actually moved it down further on this hose, just to give a little bit more clearance for the linkage cable, which is right here, because it was kind of rubbing on this little like crossover fuel rail piece. So yeah, I just moved it here. Next step, I gotta figure out where the harness is gonna go, where to run that. I think I'm gonna run it through under the bilge, follow it along this cable here, and then just tie into the harness somehow. So stay tuned, that'll be the next step, and we'll see what happens. Okay, next up we are under the dash. I need to locate a spot to plug in the wiring harnesses. Let's see, so we're taking a look over here. We got the horn. We have the MDC right here. Got our grounding bus right over here. And I just need to find a extra purple wire to run for our power. And the grounds will obviously go right over here. So stay tuned, we'll see what we can do. Okay, next up we have the master module going in. We have the display, the servo power cable, which is pretty thick. We have the power going to the master module right here. And then this is the RPM sensor, so this has to hook up to the RPM wire. So all of that going in next. Okay, next step, we need to run the RPM harness down through the bilge and up through over here. Okay, next step. So got the harness connected. I connected it right here along this water hose. I have it zip tied to this cable that runs down into the bilge. And if we look over here, you can see it kind of runs up right here. Actually, I had to take that panel off. There's 4 screws in order to feed the fish down and grab it to bring it up. So not a lot of space, but it'll work. Okay, next step is some of the reassembly. I had to get down to the bilge. Kind of see where that gray wire is right there. That gray one is the wire that we had to run through. So to get access, I had to take off this panel. It goes next to the pump, so that in the reassembly, I'm just going to put this back in and run in the screws. So there's a screw here, and here, then there's 2 on the other side. Okay, so we got the cable routed. Next step is going to be to install the master module and the harnesses and the display. So every boat's going to be a little bit different. I originally wanted mine to be down here, somewhere like up over like this wall. Doesn't look like that's really possible without interfering with the little net thing. So what I'm going to end up doing is underneath where the passenger seat is. It's a nice big space up here by where like that fuse is. So I think I'm going to put it right here. That way it's out of the way, it's hidden, and there should be enough wire to still run it over to where everything needs to go. Okay, next step. So I put the ground wires on the ground bus, and that are these two red ones. The purple one goes to ignition on, and then this gray one on the other harness goes for the RPM signal. So those are the next two to put in. Then I'm going to route the wires over to where the master module is going, but it's a nice clean shot of the bus bar and how I connected them. Okay, so I finally located the connections you can use for the power and the RPM signal. They're in this bundle of wires. They were taped up with a bunch of electrical tape. So if you can unwind that, you can access these two plugs and you can use those for the connection. Okay, so we got the display mounted right here. Gotta figure out what I'm gonna do with this wire. Gonna like try to hide that a little bit more. But then everything's set up down here. Last step is gonna be to tie up these wires, make it all nice and clean, and then we'll be ready to go for the water test. So stay tuned.